Commission. The time is 7:34, and I call this meeting to order and ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. People that are in the audience as well. People at home that are watching us, thank you. So as far as the roll call over here, most of us are here. Jane is on vacation. I believe Ginny is as well. And John sends his regrets. He's not able to make it tonight. He's a work-related function. Other than that, we are all here. So you should have an agenda before you. Is there any additions or deletions to the agenda as presented?
Mr. Chairman, I propose to make one addition to the agenda. That would be an inventory of bicycle pedestrian path signage. And we have a citizen here tonight, Tom Snyder, that is interested in addressing that and would ask that that be added to the agenda.
Excellent.
I have a proposed change.
All right.
Can we change the month on the agenda to June?
Yes, thank you.
And then the bike fix stations, is that about Henry?
There's two different aspects.
Okay, I have paperwork from Henry that I want to give to somebody, whoever
Okay.
wants it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other additions or deletions to the agenda? And we'll move on. Here, before you should have the minutes from our May meeting. Dan was able to put these together. I believe he presented them via email in the past. I'm not sure if everyone's had a chance to look at it. I'll give you, about a minute or so to look at it here.
There were some corrections. I hope I made them all.
There's not any additional changes to the minutes. I'd like to have someone make a motion to accept the meeting minutes.
A motion that we accept the minutes.
Second.
Nicole and Alan, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes. All right, first up on the agenda is open public comment. Anyone that would like to speak about something not specifically on the agenda, feel free to come up and state your name as well as talk about what's the topic at hand. Is there anything that anybody would like to talk about that's not on the agenda? Hearing none, we'll close public comment and move into updates. The first update we have is our open space update. So either Dan or Carl, would you be able to give us an update on what's going on with open space?
Okay, well, there's a couple things going on. As you can see behind me,
Maybe we put that
Mike,
up on the
can I
Elmo?
put that up front? Let me put this up front.
Maybe we can put it on the Elmo, on the
Well, I'll show
overhead.
you where Mike recommended if we didn't
Okay.
have a huge audience. Good? Thank you.
We can get it with that camera, but the audience can't see it there.
Okay. The Grosio Nature and Land Conservancy put this together for us. It shows the bike path, it shows the open space, it shows a bunch of different things. It shows our preserves. It shows also state and federal owned land here on the island. We're going to have 3 of these. One's going to be with the open space, one's going to be with BPAC, one's going to be with the Conservancy, and we're going to have a few extra in the township office. We're also going to have pamphlets in the township office that will be available for our residents to pick up and they can familiar themselves with this diagram of the island. Anybody have any questions?
We have spots where we're thinking that we'd put them.
We haven't come up with that yet. I just picked this up tonight. It was one of the last minute deals. Any other questions? Anybody from the audience? Okay.
Rather than a question, I'll just have a comment that I know that we did get a map of the Downriver Link Greenway system. Recently from the Downriver Link Greenways, I believe it was stored. I think Jane might actually have a copy of that, and then the poles for it are still stored over at the Wildlife Refuge over in Trenton, and we're looking for a location for that. I think that wherever we put that, this might be a nice complement to it, so you can see the larger system as well as what specifically Groseal has to offer in more detail.
Well, Trenton has their summer festival this coming up next weekend, and I was hoping that we'd get somebody from the group to take this along. I may be out of town for the weekend, not sure yet, but I would like this to be in the booth. We're also going to have some trail cams, and we'll talk about that later. Any other questions or comments? Go ahead.
So you want it at the booth. All right, who's going to get it there?
It depends who's going. If you're going to be there, I'll
go there Saturday.
Okay.
And it starts Friday.
I'm thinking if I'm in town on Friday, I will be there Friday, and I'll make arrangements to get it to you. So
Got
we
it.
can have it on Saturday. But
Awesome.
I want to make sure that we get it back and we don't lose touch with this.
All right, so if someone ever wants to leave it at Custard Corner, you're welcome to.
That's where I was going to. You knew exactly where I was. Anybody else? Okay, that's about all I have right now for open space.
Thank you.
Carol, any questions?
No, sir. Excellent.
Moving on, we have our Parkway Connector update. So for those of you in the audience as well as at home, BPAC has been working on providing a connection between our pathway on Meridian Roadway and our Free Bridge, and then potentially working with Trenton on the other side to be able to connect to the Jefferson pathway. So that way you're more officially be able to link up with the Downriver Link Greenways and fill in a major gap in the Iron Bell Trail. So we've been looking at a variety of different corridors. We had a public meeting back in April to talk with the residents along Groseal Parkway about the various options, where they made it clear that there were certain options that they were less favorable of, as well as there were some that they were a little bit more favorable of. And so with that, we've been looking at a little more detail about options that would be either along the south side of Groseal Parkway, outside of the road, more of a traditional bike path, as well as options along Bellevue Road. There hasn't been a lot of progress in regards to a preferred alternative, but there was a hiccup where we were working with Wayne County, and Wayne County thought that they did not own the roadway. So that presented a challenge because we needed to figure out, okay, who owns the roadway, but so that way we can discuss it with that roadway owner so that we can figure out what these different alternatives are. As of earlier this week, I did find out that Wayne County was mistaken and they do own that roadway. So I know that CE Rains Company will be meeting with officials from Wayne County. They've invited me to be a part of that meeting, so that way we can talk both about options for Bellevue Road, as well as there's some other issues that they're looking at unrelated to the bike paths, but at the intersection of Grow and Meridian. So I will have more to report on the future, but that's our update on the Parkway Connector. Is there any questions or comments or anything that people would like to add?
The only thing I would add, Mr. Pollack, is that Kim O'Farrell and I had discussions regarding this, and she has some ideas about options for Bellevue, particularly based upon her experience in Ohio. But I'm going to be meeting with Mr. Ream, Township Manager, on Monday to review those and see what is practical in his experience with Wayne County. So we have ideas. Now it's about to putting those ideas to the test. Can we do that? Is Wayne County, in our experience, at least a bit receptive? So that's going to be happening. I'm going to be meeting with him on Monday morning.
Okay, that's great. Any other comments, questions? Moving on, talk about the bicycle and pedestrian education campaign or update. I can start this off, and Dan can chime in. So as it's mentioned in the past, that we're trying to raise awareness about bicycle and pedestrian safety and sharing the paths and sharing the road. And so we were able to get a grant through the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments in order to purchase bike lights as well as light up bracelets and do a public outreach campaign. There has been some momentum on that with Dan, myself, and Jane working with our great township staff as well as folks through the vendor that we've picked, and we're able to actually purchase those said equipment. So with that, I'll let Dan talk a little bit more about our giveaways that we'll have for people over the summer and into the fall.
Okay, today at the township office, I picked up our bike lights. We have about 400 of them. There's a front and a back. It comes in a case and it says rock and roll, Grozeal.
Would you like me to put that up on the screen?
Would you please? And also I have a bracelet that also says, Brian, you want to take this one too?
Yeah, I'll do that.
And this is also, it says rock and roll Grozeal. It lights up for our pedestrians walking at night and in the dusk. I think it's a great opportunity for our residents to be seen and try to avoid as many possible accidents as possible. They will be available to the police department is our one goal, and the officers will have them in their patrol cars to pass out as they see people on our bike paths riding without lights, or our walkers or joggers without some type of lighted up bracelet. That's about all I have, Brian. It's pretty cool. It blinks. And it also lights up.
Nice.
Well, the front light.
There you go. It's a blinking light. And it also has the standards.
As well as the rear light.
Yep. And the back light blinks and it also goes on, I believe. Yep.
So we're hoping that we will have literature available to go along with
Yes.
these giveaways. And potentially some...
Now, I'd like to pass these out to our committee members to take a peek at. Feel free to open up the packages, click them on, try the bracelets on. That's about all I have, Brian. Do you have anything more to add?
I say that these materials cost about $7,000,
Just a little under, yes.
with more than 80% being covered by the SEMCOG grant. So we want to thank our friends over at SEMCOG that were able to make this happen, as well as thank the township for being able to find the other funds, especially working with the police department in order to make that happen. And we're hoping that we'll be able to pass these out at different events and work with the police department to make sure people that are vulnerable, don't have lights of any kind, will be safe at night.
I need to go back to that.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Any questions from the audience?
Hearing none, we'll move back to the item that I neglected, the maintenance update. So at our previous meeting, we had approved funding in order to take care of the staining of, as well as some repairs on our 3 major bridges over the bike paths. So that would be the one on Long Grove Road, near the Township Hall over here, the Meridian bridge that's across from Meridian Elementary along Meridian Road, and that one needs extensive work to it, as well as the bridge that crosses the Thoroughfare Canal. I believe in total that'd be around $68,000 that we're estimating for that work. It could be more if we have to do a total rebuild of the Meridian Bridge, but as of right now, our bridge repair person, Wes Pfeiffer, does not believe that should be necessary, and that there might be some cost savings based on some of the other work that the township will be doing, including over at the Macomb Street overlook. I know that there is some issues that still needs to, BPAC as an advisory commission does not make final decisions, especially when it comes to funding, especially in large amounts. So we make recommendations to the township board, and the township board is the one that makes things official in that regards. We provide recommendations to them. So I believe the next step would be for the township board to recommend that, and I believe that they will be doing so in July. Is there anything else that we need to add on to that, Carl? I believe you might have some insights.
No, when I spoke with Township Manager Ream, he indicated that those will be on the first July meeting, the Township Board, and it is with the idea that they will be accepting the recommendation and approving the requested expenditure and letting the contract out for the repairs of those bridges as well as the overlook. And the overlook is going to have all of the wood removed. The steel is going to be cleaned, and everything will be painted, and we're going to put new wood in. It has been 27 years since that structure was built, so we anticipate that there's going to be quite a bit of work, but at the end it will hopefully be ready for another 27 or 30 years or even more. That's the goal.
Carl, did they get any monetary savings from doing the bridge on Meridian and the Outlook Bridge?
That remains to be seen because we haven't let the contract out yet. Dale indicated to me that he thought that the savings would be there, and if anybody could find some savings, it would be Wes that would do that. So the answer is not yet, but we're certainly working on that.
Thank you. The other aspect is doing maintenance to the asphalt surfaces of the bike path. So I am coordinating with CE Rains on that, and I know that they were looking to see how much money that they would have available in order to create that maintenance plan. I will send information on to you afterwards. We've talked about this before, but it's been a while, so I want to make sure that everyone has a chance to take a look at this in more detail. But essentially, if we leave $103,000 reserved for bridge work, and that's because, looking at the worst case scenario where we do have to rebuild the Meridian Bridge, we'd have approximately $200,000 left in our maintenance budget, and we accrue approximately $90,000 per year based on the millage for future repairs. But around 40 of that should go for routine maintenance. So that includes the sweeping and the snow removal and the mowing of the grass, as well as other things that need to happen every year in order to make sure that the paths are usable. So with that being said, we have about $200,000 plus $25,000 per year to work with in regards to a maintenance budget for taking care of asphalt, and that could be things such as crack sealing, taking those cracks and putting in some materials in between to seal those cracks so that way water can't infiltrate, doing an actual seal coat along the entire asphalt itself, so it's basically like a paint that goes over top of the asphalt in order to preserve the integrity of the asphalt, as well as doing some shallow or full depth repairs of the asphalt itself. So some of the vernacular for doing a thin overlay is more of like I believe they say shave and pave, where you're taking off a couple maybe an inch or two of the asphalt to get to some of the asphalt that's in better shape, and then you add additional asphalt over top. And in some cases, you might actually have to pull up everything down to the base because the base has been compromised, and that might be because of tree roots or drainage issues. So in order for CE Rains, in order to develop a plan for this year as well as others into the future and be able to put out a proposal or advertise potential work for vendors to bid on, we need to make sure that we are able to finalize these numbers and what they have to work with. So I will send that information out, and hopefully in the next couple days we can talk about that more, so that way CE Rains will know exactly what their budget is, and we can get something ready for advertising so we can see if we can get this work done in the fall. Questions, comments?
When does that millage expire, come up for renewal, or whatever they do?
That's a good question. I do not remember when it expires as of right now. I think we're 2 years into it, and I'd have to check to see when it expires, but other questions? All right. Hearing none, we'll move on. I have a bicycling skills course update. I believe that, I'm not sure if we mentioned it at the last meeting, but we were trying to have a bicycling skills course in coordination with the recreation department. We're all set to have that happen. We had people registering for it, and then our instructor, who is certified, had to accept another job on the other side of the state and was unable to actually fulfill the course over here, that he was volunteering to do that. Since then, we've been looking at ways to bring a new instructor on board, and so we do have some leads, but as of right now, we still don't have any firm commitments to when those people would be able to do the course. So hopefully in the next couple weeks or month here, we'll have some more definitive analysis on whether or not we can make this still happen this year or next. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to add to that?
Yes, last meeting we brought up possibly integrating the bicycle skill class into the curriculum at the Groseal school system in the gym program. Has anything been done on that?
I emailed the PE instructors and looked at the curriculum, and it didn't look, as far as I could see in the pages of curriculum, that there was any bike safety in there. There was a lot of water safety, but no bicycle. So they said, I got an email back saying they would look at that and discuss and get back to me. It sounded like if they were to be able to find something, it would be a one-day thing that they would be interested in.
Still better than nothing, Rebecca.
Yes.
Thank you.
Others? Hearing none, move on. Last item under updates is Glow Roll. I know Jane is not here. Usually she's giving us a good update on what's going on with that. But I'll recap that we do have a new lead working on the Glow Roll, and there was a Glow Roll that happened, I believe, either last week or 2 weeks ago. Met at the Tasty Freeze, and I know, Dan, that you're able to see people up there. It looked like it was pretty successful.
Yes, it was. I saw quite a few adults, children, and I'd say junior high or middle school, old me, high school students. I thought the turnout looked pretty strong. Hopefully they were all there for the Glow Roll and enjoying a nice ice cream as they waited to get started.
Great.
That's good. It's all good.
All right, moving on down the agenda. Next item is Trenton Trail Towns.
I can talk about that unless you have
Sounds
something.
good. No? You have the floor.
Okay,
sir.
there's a Trenton. Well, let's start out with West Jefferson. Connection happened beginning of the month, and it was a great turnout, and it was amazing that it took almost 20 years for this to happen. At Trenton Days, or Summer Days, they're going to have what they're calling Trail Town Training 101. And it will be from 10 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon. We're looking for volunteers to man our booth along with Trenton. We're going to share one. And it's going to be a fun time. If there's anybody interested on the committee on taking part in that, I know Nicole is, and if I'm in town, I'm going to take part on Friday. I contacted a couple of our students with the surrounding schools, and both of them seem to be out of town that weekend. So right now we're looking for volunteers. If you're interested, you can get a hold of us at BPAC. Also, Trenton, this past June 5th, we had a meeting concerning what's it take to become a trail town. We went over different things. We kept the meeting on time to the agenda, and the next follow-up meeting, the next half of what we think is important, is going to be July 17th at the Trenton City Hall. All of everybody on the committee, I passed out what we talked about, and what was really nice is all those attendants from Wayne County, Trenton, Groseal, downriver. We all talked about what we felt and voted on what we thought were the important issues that we need to address. So we're moving forward, and I think as we discussed at our last meeting, I think it'd be great if we could turn Groseal into a trail town also, and that's, it's down the road. It's something that I think would be great, and we'll go from there. That's about all I have on the trail towns. Any questions? Okay.
Thanks for that report, Dan.
Welcome.
Next item on the agenda is bike fix-it stations. So in the past, we've talked about different efforts to try and get these, for lack of a better word, racks where you could put a bicycle up on it and be able to do some minor repairs to your bicycle if you're out on a path somewhere and you get a flat tire or you need some adjustments to either your spokes, your handlebars, if you just need some air. There's a variety of tools that would be available to help that out, and so those can be helpful, especially where you have trailheads or other information. So potentially like Macomb Commons or in the downtown district or other destinations. So in the past, there's been two ways that we've been looking to potentially implement them. One is working with the Rotary Club that they'd mentioned in the past that they had money for a donation, and we suggested that they use it for bike fix-it station. So Jane and I are still pursuing that to see if that offer is still on the table.
I'm talking to her.
But the other option is through an Eagle Scout project. I know that both Dan and Nicole have been talking with our Eagle Scout, so maybe the two of you could provide a little information on any updates with that.
Okay, at the West Jefferson Connection meeting, I touched base with one of the local bike shop owners who said that he'd be more than willing to help with the costs on fix-it stations for us. I have not had a chance to speak with our Eagle Scout yet. I'm waiting to do so. I just received his Navigating the Eagle Scout project today, and we will be talking to him soon. And Nicole, do you have anything to add?
Just that those two papers I gave you, I wanted to scan them and send them to everybody, but I've had an internet problem, so I don't know if there's a way you can save it on our drive. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I can do that.
But it looks like it's guidelines to make sure that the BPAC is in charge of making sure that fix-it station is cared for going forward.
Mm-hmm. That's about all we have on that. I'm still waiting. Jane was going to contact someone, John from the Rotary, and as we mentioned earlier, she's on vacation this week, and I hope to hear from her upon her return of whether or not those funds are still available. If they are, it's getting us on our way to get at least one fix-it station as soon as possible and work towards a second.
Dan, have you given any thought to where you'd like them located?
I'm thinking somewhere around the Commons would be the ideal place, and maybe somewhere down here towards the airport. I'm open for suggestions from the community and from the committee. I mean, what are your thoughts, Alan? You're a former police officer here on the
I like
island.
the fact that the Commons area in the front of the police department allows them to use the bathroom if they have to. Mm-hmm. It gives a sense of security to it, so it's not vandalized if it is in front of the police department. And it's centrally located, so I can't think of any reason not to put it there.
I spoke to the owner of the bike shop that was at the connection, and they're pretty durable. Actually, they had one that was donated, and both Brian and I looked it over, and we were pretty impressed with it. Brian, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I know that it was mentioned that you can, for example, with the pumps, purchase other equipments that might be cheaper, but generally it's less durable, and so you're going to end up replacing them every year. So it's good to go with more of the a major company in regards to equipment that's made to be outdoors. And I believe that this equipment too, that some of the tools that you'd be using in order to work on your bicycle, that's replaceable. So that way, in case it gets damaged or stolen, that you're not having to buy some unique part that's available, that you might be able to just go over to a local store and purchase something new and hook it back up on there.
I thought the representative from the bike shop was very thorough in his presentation to us, and hopefully the funding will be available and we can get one of these fix-it stations up as soon as possible. But that's all I have.
Yeah, I'll just add that if we're able to secure future funds, or in the future be able to have multiple stations, I think it makes sense to put them anywhere where you actually have a lot of bicycles going to. So including the destinations you mentioned is like maybe Water's Edge might be a nice option because kids are riding there all the time, adults as well. They have some concerts down there. A Centennial Farm might be another spot, or I'm sure the schools might be interested in having something up there. So with that, I'll move on to the next item on the agenda, and it's about counters. So SEMCOG, Southeast Michigan Council of Governments, has been working on a multimodal count program. So in the past, as people probably know, is that from the transportation side, we count cars. So oftentimes when you're driving down a road, you might see tubes that are going across the roadway. Vehicle, and depending on the distance between axles or like the weight, those counters are able to determine if it's what type of vehicle it is, if it's a passenger vehicle, if it's a truck, if it's a motorcycle. So for over 50 years, there's been this science behind counting vehicles, and that information is helpful in order to predict usage, as well as plan for future projects, look at safety data, and analyze, okay, well, there's X number of crashes happening at this, this roadway, at this intersection or segment, but how many vehicles are actually traveling through there, so you get a crash rate, or, percentage of vehicles that go through that, are unaffected by a crash versus have a crash, so you can compare, roadway segments more fairly. We're kind of going into that realm in regards to bicycle and pedestrian travel now. So as more communities are investing in bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, they'd like to be able to, as well as programs, look at being able to measure success. So looking at are more people walking or biking, or is the infrastructure that's been added having the intended effect? As doing before and after studies, as I mentioned about safety data, comparing where you might have pedestrian or bicycle crash hotspots, and comparing likewise, and figure out, is it because there's truly a safety concern, or is it just because there's hundreds or thousands of people traveling through that area in a given week? As well as you can use it for land use decisions and put it in place for the planning side of things with traffic impact studies and new developments that are going in and anticipating the amount of people that might be walking or biking, and providing dedicated infrastructure and such. So SEMCOG, as well as MDOT, Michigan Department of Transportation, and others have been looking at developing a bicycle pedestrian travel count program. And so this past June, they're counting locations across Southeast Michigan. And so Grozio was lucky enough to get 2 counters that were, the technology was used, set up at 2 different intersections, one at Meridian and Grozio Parkway, and another at Meridian and Bellevue Road. And for 16 hours, it'll let you know the number of vehicles that are traveling through those intersections, as well as the number of bicyclists and pedestrians. And so that will be useful information in itself, just to know how many people are traveling. I believe it was a nice sunny Wednesday day that the counters were out there, so hopefully we have some good numbers, and it'll help contribute to the larger picture, and hopefully it'll be information that'll be useful for future projects. So, that being said, I want this commission, as well as others, to think about, okay, is it something that we'd be interested in doing more so in the future in regards to different projects, potentially purchasing our own, counting equipment that we could use and be able to move from one location to another to get different counts on different days. I just want to put it out there that that's a possibility, as well as potentially, other locations that others like SEMCOG or MDOT might be able to help pay for in the future in regards to temporary counts or permanent counters.
I have a question, Brian. Is there any way we could, and I'm a firm believer in when you buy equipment, it's only as new as it is the day you purchase it. Is there any way we could look into possibly leasing this type of equipment instead of purchasing it? So we could always have the opportunity for the most updated? I mean, what's your thoughts?
Well, I'd say that that's a great question, and you're thinking like the way that SEMCOG has been thinking. So they have been utilizing consultants in order to do these counts, because the consultants purchase the equipment, they go out there, they set it up, and you get the data back. And that way there's not somebody that has to specialize in that equipment and be trained in it, as well as you don't have technology that might go out of date. The trouble is that depending on, at some point there's a rate of return where you start to lose the, becomes much more costly in order to utilize a consultant in order to do it. So I'll just say, for example, utilizing the technology that SEMCOG has used, that you're counting multiple modes in an intersection over a defined period of time, in this case 16 hours, it costs approximately $600 for that location for one day. So if you wanted to do 7 days of counts, well, that's going to be a lot more money. And the counters themselves, depending on what your technology you're looking at, range between $3,000 and $17,000. So at some point, depending on what your goals are and what you want to do, it might make more sense to purchase as opposed to utilizing a consultant to do it. On the leasing side of things, there is other technology out there, so it's always good to look at it. And I can inform you on what we've found as far as those technologies. But I think it's good to realize that there needs to be a balance in there, and depending on our goals and the the area that we're looking at, one way might be better than another. And it kind of leads into the next topic that I'm talking about over here. So other questions or comments? All right, moving on. The next item on the agenda is talking about microgrants, and I don't have a lot to present on it. I just want to say that there are state and national organizations that give out grants every year for communities that are looking to promote walking and biking, and that it would probably behoove us to be aware of those and those timelines and see if we can potentially win some of those grants. Some of these grants are through like the League of Michigan Bicyclists or the League of American Bicyclists, America Walks, Bikes Belong. There's a long list of organizations where you can get a small amount of money, and that's why we call them micro grants. It might be $100, might be $500, but it's much smaller than grants that you use for typical infrastructure, where you might get $100,000 or $1 million for a project. So I was hoping that we could all start thinking about that and maybe develop a list or a handbook of what grants are out there that are potentially reoccurring, and get someone to start potentially applying for these. So that way things like bike fix-it stations or counters or other amenities and enhancements can be potentially purchased and not on the dime of our taxpayers.
Can you forward that list to me?
Yeah.
I think we had success with the SEMCOG grant, and I'd kind of like to look into that myself, because I think take advantage of any funding we can get, whether it's for, like you mentioned, fix-it stations, even a helmet type program or whatever. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's all different things that we should be looking at to protect our citizens.
Yeah.
And even our visitors.
I know the Michigan Fitness Foundation, they have micro grants for safe routes to school programs. So again, if it's something that we're looking to do beyond walk to school day and bike to school day, there might be grant sources to help out with that. Nothing that's going to be able to pay for programs in perpetuity or 100%, but every little bit helps. So with that, one of the last items on the agenda before going into closing would be just an announcement that Groseal Police Department has a bike patrol. So Alan, I don't know if you'd like to just provide a little summary of what's going on with that?
Well, I will tell you that I was very happy to see one day I was working in my yard and a gentleman pulled up on a police bike, got off. I didn't recognize him because he had his helmet on, and walked over, and it was Officer Counts. It was his first day on patrol on the bike, and he was real excited to tell me about it. He had spent a week in school learning the ins and outs of operating a police bike. He had a beautiful bike, well equipped, and he will be spending a lot of time on the bike paths, socializing, doing public relations, and overseeing the path. It gives the police department a insight to our bike paths in trails, not just the hard but the soft, and I think it'll keep them a little bit more informed on the paths and what's going on and their needs. And I was really happy to see him. I did invite Officer Counts to attend tonight. He couldn't make the meeting. But we just want to make mention that when you do see the officer riding his bike around, wave and give him your support. He's spending a lot of his own time to do this, and he really believes in the program. So give him your support.
Alan?
Do you know what his hours are, Alan?
You know, it's a sporadic thing. It's according to his shift.
Okay.
I don't know if other officers are going to be trained in this. I wish Officer Counts could have made it tonight because we could have asked him about these concerns, but I would like to see several of them trained in it. Not only does it make for a healthy police officer, it just makes for a more friendly community and more outreach to the police department.
I think it gets them out of the patrol car and out with the community.
Yeah. But thanks again. If Kevin, you're out there watching, thanks again for your time and effort.
Thank you.
So the last item before closing reports is the item that we added to the agenda about bike path signage.
My name is Tom Snyder. It's 8448 Rucker. The reason I'm before the committee this evening is because I've asked a couple of questions and I've been steered to this committee. Past police administrations, I have asked what the rules are as far as stop signs and other signs on the bike path. I live on Rucker, which is the first street south of Meridian Schools that doesn't have stop signs. Other streets do, Lake, Manchester, Bellevue. Ironically, the first street south doesn't have it. About 7 or 8 years ago, my wife was going to work, 5:30 in the morning, stopped where she was supposed to, then was easing out to go forward. Young man who just graduated high school that year hit into her tire and then went over her hood. Because my wife was the car, she was the one that was not ticketed, but we were responsible for fixing that young man's bike. But when asked why he didn't stop, he said, I don't have to stop on this street, it doesn't have a stop sign. The past police administration believed that because they're technically not legal signs, he did not want to replace them. But the community believes where there's a stop sign, they'll stop. Where there isn't one, they won't. And I guess I'm not sure what we can do as far as, do we look to see if the signs need to be replaced? Was that sign fallen? Was it a strategic reason why that sign wasn't there? I originally had some questions at the board level. Board thought it was a good idea for me to go to a police commission meeting. Police commission recommendation was to come here to get the recommendation of this committee because they didn't feel comfortable enough at that meeting to give me an answer. So I think they're looking for some guidance for you guys to see what's going on. I talked to Mr. Riem, who is our township manager. He thought there may be some signs stored behind maybe the public service building. He was looking into that, but time's of the essence, and obviously that didn't get a chance to get finished. But I was wondering if there was a way that you guys can give me some guidance, whether is it a BPAC recommendation? Is it something that the police have done in the past, or?
So I know, Carl, that you wanted to start responding.
Tom, I feel like you've been job shadowing me for the last month because I did see you at the board meeting, and we did have you come to the police commission meeting, and you raised that when I was at the meeting, and the police commission recommended that you come here to BPAC. I've had a chance to follow up with Dale Ream. Dale and I have concluded that the best way to begin is to do an inventory, and that is to look at all of the intersections where the bicycle pedestrian path crosses vehicular traffic pathways. So as an example, we can look at Lake Road in Meridian and say, hey, there's a sign there. That makes sense. And we can look at Rucker in Meridian and say, there's no sign here, there's no striping, there's nothing here to indicate to a pedestrian or more importantly a bicyclist, because they move so much faster that hey, you need to stop and then proceed. Next street north, you go to Manchester. We have the sign there. Signs are effective. Signs are very effective reminding people. It's kind of like when your mother and father told you not to put your finger in that wall socket because something bad would happen to you. Well, if you see that wall socket or you see that stop sign, you're going to stop when you're on a bicycle. If you don't see that sign or there's nothing there to tell you to stop, human nature is such that you're going to roll through it because nobody told you not to. What I would propose to do, and I would be very willing to be involved in this, would be to do an inventory on all of the connections there where the bike path crosses vehicular traffic, and maybe bring that back to our next meeting. And in the meantime, I would talk with Dale and say, what can we do about getting the appropriate traffic control devices for pedestrians and for bicyclists in place ASAP. I think it's important. I think your family experience, while it was unfortunate, we also have a new administration looking at things a little bit differently. And I think that would be very, very good thing for us to do and present to police and present to Dale and to the township board. Say, here's our inventory. This is a matter of public safety, certainly what the police are involved in and what the township board is involved in. Let's go ahead and address this situation. So I propose by starting with an inventory, Mr. Chairman.
I agree.
Great. First of all, I want to thank you for coming up here and bringing up this subject matter. It is close to our heart. It's something that we've been talking about. And Mr. Liaison, I appreciate you mentioning about the inventory, because that's something that we did start in the past, but this commission has had some turnovers, and we've had a couple of different projects going on. So it's one of these things that we've been looking to do, but never followed through on. But I would say that I agree that the inventory is necessary, but I would tend to disagree to say that once you put a sign up, that people are going to obey it, because signs have to. There's a saying that right design invites right use. So there's things that people do because it makes sense, and the sign reinforces that. It's the common sense aspect. And there's things that doesn't make sense, and so people are probably going to violate that. So in some situations where there is a stop sign, you might not see a bicyclist stop at that area because again, maybe it doesn't make sense. Maybe it's a low traveled roadway, and the issue of especially a bicyclist starting and stopping. It takes a lot of effort in order to do that, and so you're going to see a lot of people not stopping over there. And the last thing I want to do is put up something and then people still disobey it, and we have an even bigger safety issue on there. My
goal on that, Brian, would be to have an increased awareness that there is something going on here in front of you. You're on your bicycle, and whether you're doing 5 miles an hour or 15 or 25, there's something here for you to be more aware of. And that would be my goal, and I think what we all would want to accomplish. I certainly don't know that 5:30 a.m. Would have made a difference when you don't have, and I'm not an advocate for lighting signs and things like that, but at the same time, I think that can develop better habits, which is what you're referring to.
And I would just add that, I'm sorry, Nicole, did you want to say something?
Go ahead and add your thing, and then I'll...
over the time I've been chair of this commission, I've learned that the bike paths have been developed in phases, And so with that, there's different, they say, guidelines in place during those timelines that things were developed. There might have been different engineers in place that did that. So there might be some inconsistencies based on the timeline that the projects have been gone through, as well as you mentioned, there might be issues where there was a sign that was taken down because of an accident or something and it wasn't replaced. Additionally, sometimes I'd say that some parts of the pathway might be a little oversigned. And there's signs that are definitely for safety, and then there's signs that are like more just helpful information, and there's again signs that's like, why is this even up here? It's just sign clutter. So I propose that along with after you do the inventory and you're looking at the safety signs and making sure what makes sense from a safety standpoint is say, is a sign the actual best use in order to indicate the message that we're trying to convey? And can you get by with less signage and do something else with the designing in order to make sure that message is still conveyed, or maybe that's a message that isn't really that important and we can just get rid of that. So I know that there's been some folks that have taken issue with the number of signs, and so that's one of my goals as well, is to make sure that the signs that are put up are smart and strategic and minimum when necessary. Yes, Nicole.
So, Mr. Snyder here had a real life situation where he's responsible for the cost of the bike, and his wife's got the whole situation that happened, and the young man blamed not having a sign. And it's true, I live on Rucker too. There are signs at the other nearby streets, but not at Rucker. Is there anything keeping us from putting up signs that are identical to those while we investigate? Or at least in the direction coming from the schools, so that there aren't any excuses while we investigate. And if you need a volunteer, I can grab a sign. I can take one from the wrong side of Lake and just plant it. Like, I'll volunteer to do it. Is there any reason not to do that while we investigate? Because sometimes investigations take months and months and months. We know right now that it mattered. What do you think?
I want to know, if we have them available. Signs cost money to manufacture, and I'd hate to put up a sign and then it's just to be taken down later on.
Well, first of all, we're going to do an inventory of what we have on hand, right? And then we're going to go through the paths and see what we need, right? I think that's the first step. If we have a sign available and Dale finds one, I suggest that we put it up, whether or not it's temporary or permanent. Put the sign up. I believe if you don't, in Mr. Snyder's case, his wife's case, the cyclist said there was no sign. Well, there's no sign on that light socket that Carl was talking about either, but there's common sense. I believe that if we have a sign in inventory, put it up if it's temporary or permanent, and let's move on to see where we may need other signs or reduce the number of signs. And I think that's the way we should be going.
Brian, you run a risk of the inconsistency, but you also run a risk of putting up non-regulatory signs and that people rely on those for, and people may not obey them. And even if the stop sign was there and you ran it, I don't know that it changes your situation. So I think we got to be careful with putting up signs that without some sort of research into that. And I can look into that. I know a few traffic engineers.
Yeah, I don't know any.
You could probably talk to one within the hour.
Yeah, I definitely could. And the other thing I want to mention is, because Steve was talking about this, there is specific guidance out there from the vehicle side. All the signs are supposed to meet the MMUTCD, or Michigan Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And so, when you hear comments like, oh, the signs on the bike path aren't real signs or something like that, is because they're probably talking about what meets the MUTCD for vehicle traffic. And if it's not under the domain of Wayne County, which is responsible for where those crossings are, they care less about those, and so they might just say that they're not real signs. But there's enough, if it's not something that specifically meets the threshold for MUTCD, there is the AASHTO, or American Association for State Transportation Officials, and they put out a specific bicycle design guidelines, and they talk about when and where you should be signing and like what types those are. So between those two manuals, which do generally tend to work together, like the AASHTO guidelines would probably say use this number 5 sign, and then you'd look that up in the MUTCD, and it could show you what that sign is and what those dimensions are and what those that costs. I think that's the approach that we should be looking at, as long as especially using engineering judgment on these things, as Steve mentioned, not just acting haphazardly and based on just like a gut instinct, because it could open us up to more liability. Right now, I don't think anything is happening. It's super urgent that we need to put up a stop sign yesterday, but I think it's Mr. Snyder coming up here and talking about this and getting the ear of our township officials as well as this commission, helps reignite that this is something that we need to look at. So I'm all in favor of doing that, but I do agree with what Steve was saying, is that we should approach this cautiously at the same time.
And again, my concern was the inconsistencies. Because of the inconsistency of the signs, somebody's perception was they didn't have to stop there. So if that's the case, if a Rucker sign isn't needed, then probably the Lake sign isn't needed, then probably the Manchester sign isn't needed, and then the Bellevue, in my opinion. And I think that there needs to be a consistency. And again, in my opinion, I would think safety, I would feel that safety should be the number 1 priority, and I'm looking to add signs, but I think consistency is probably very important also. Thank you.
Thank you. And we can talk more about this offline. All right.
Thank you, Tom.
Next item on the agenda is the Township Board Liaison Report.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that's been covered in my prior comments regarding the bicycle path, pedestrian path signage, the Bellevue options, as well as the pending approval, hopefully, of the expenditures and contracts for maintenance over the bridges and the overlook.
I have one question. Where are we at with the ferry crossing?
The purchase of the new Ferry Road connector with Gage and Ferry has not been completed. I will be talking again with the township attorney on Monday night. Mr. Assorti will give me an update on that. And we're asking that be done as soon as possible. But a major concern is all of the rain that we've been receiving. I understand 3 out of 4 days in May were wet, and we're not going to be able to do too much with TNT and that trail until things dry out, or we're going to be having equipment and a lot of damage to the area. Equipment getting stuck, and the path won't be able to be as easily built when you have that kind of mud and, frankly, still a lot of water back there.
I was more concerned about the closing. Have we closed on it yet?
We have not closed on it yet.
Thank you. Moving on to the chair's report, I have 2 items I'd like to talk about. The first item is regards to an issue that we do have a member of the public at large that has been coming to all of our meetings, been helping us out as an honorary member of BPAC. And we've been looking for ways that we might be able to make that more official, but by the same time, recognizing that we have a full roster and everybody's contributing in regards to they might not be here at every single meeting, but they're helping out behind the scenes, or they're switching spots, and sometimes they'd be here for one meeting but not the next, but the person that had another meeting going on was able to show up. So we're all pulling our weight over here, but we have this person, Ms. Rebecca Kung, who has been a very valuable asset to our commission, and we want to figure out ways to make her more part of it, so that way we make sure that she continues to help us out with this stuff. So talking with our township manager, Mr. Dale Ream, I approached him about potential alternatives to do this. And he mentioned the concept of, rather than officially creating a 10th position on this commission, which has issues in regards to, we need a bylaws change, and then, we have a difference in quorum, which sometimes we have a hard time of reaching to begin with. He mentioned the aspect of a BPAC alternate. So with that, I thought that was a great idea because, again, we're not always at full staff over here, so I don't think it would ever be an issue where we have 10 people on the commission, but I would think that it would be great to have her serve as an alternate and have a voting position on this board, especially when we're not at full staff. So I wanted to bring this up and ask what everyone else's opinion would be on that. And depending on that, we could either, if there's general consensus to take a vote, we could do that today, or we could do that at the next meeting.
I'd like to propose a motion that we have Rebecca join BPAC as an alternative. She's been a very helpful person in many different projects that she's worked on, and I think it'd be to our benefit to include her as an alternate part of our group.
Before we pass any motions, though, has anyone asked Rebecca?
That's what I was going to ask now.
Would you like to join our group?
This was all kind of originated when I was doing the bike side.
Thank you.
When I was doing the bike to school day, I was thinking, what if something awful happens? Am I liable? Do I have the insurance if I'm just a hanger-on and helper? Or do I need to be an official member? Being a hanger-on and helper has its benefits because there's nothing official that you need to do. But if I'm liable for things that I'm helping with, that's not something I'm willing to take on. So I haven't really considered the options or heard about how the insurance and all of that works. I guess I'd want to hear about that and see how it would work and think about it.
Yeah, I did talk with Dale about that, and he did say that as a volunteer that you are covered under the township policy. That being said, I would personally feel more comfortable if I was in your shoes, to have more of an official status that someone couldn't argue that you weren't part of the township and that you were just happened to be there or something like that. But that's just me personally. But we do understand that it might take some time to think about that, and we just want to let you know that that offer is potentially on the table.
And again, Rebecca, thank you for everything you've done for us and for the community. It really has been a great effort. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys for all your work.
All right. So last item on my report is about a West Jefferson Corridor Committee. So, with our relationships that we've been developing both here with Grozeal, as well as, I work with SEMCOGs. I've been working with Detroit International Wildlife Refuge with Vince Isles, who has obviously been working with more communities in the Downriver area as well, because his major goal is being able to connect residents and communities all across southern Wayne County, but especially in the Downriver area, to the Wildlife Refuge, and he's had his hand in potential projects. So he's worked with us on our potential Grozeal Parkway connector. He's been working with Trenton on the Jefferson Avenue project, been working with the Downriver Link Greenways, and he's branching out a little bit more and trying to talk with the other communities about more of a coalition of communities to develop more clout, not only in the realm of transportation and walking and biking to the wildlife refuge and to communities, but also more about economic development and trail towns and just building clout in regards to having more of a voice within Wayne County as well as the state and our region. And so there is a committee that has formed called the West Jefferson Corridor Committee that did meet, I believe, last week for the first time. I was not able to attend that as I had a conflict, but I know that I will be serving as the SEMCOG representative moving forward. With that, I've let both our township liaison, Carl over here know about the project, as well as Supervisor Loftus and Township Manager Ream. And so we're hoping that there will be more of Groseal participation specifically within this effort. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, I'd like to have someone make a motion for adjournment.
Making a motion for adjournment.
Dan and Steve, all in favor?
Aye.
Close the meeting at 8:38 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Walk, bike, and drive safe.